Hey friends, Patrick here, and today let's create a new Blazor web app project here and then see what you have to pay attention to. I talked about it before, but I think I can't emphasize this enough. It is important. It might be strange at the beginning when you're seeing that and you're wondering why is Microsoft doing that. But there is a reason why Microsoft said that pre-rendering is set to true by default. So let's have a look what pre-rendering is. Blazor pre-rendering.net 8 maybe as the project name. Now regarding WebAssembly, you might be used to it that the client has to download everything anyways, and a component is only rendered on the client. Well, I totally understand that. I'm with you. I thought the same, still thinking the same sometimes, but when you're using .NET 8, you might have to think differently. And long story short, let me just show you what I mean by that. So we have the counter component here, for instance, and you see render mode interactive WebAssembly. But it does even make more sense to use something like the example weather forecast, for instance. Now here we have, we use static server-side rendering with stream rendering. Now this means, I think you know this by now, if you watched my tutorials, you did, right? That we are downloading or rendering the frame of this page here, and the actual data comes streamed a bit later. All right, so this is stream rendering, but we want to focus on pre-rendering here. So what we can do is we can just grab the weather razor component and move that down here to our pages folder, remove it here. Yep, this is what I want to do. And again, add the render mode interactive WebAssembly, for instance. So here is the weather component, just put it there. It should just work out of the box because the navigation menu here links to the weather route. All right, and this route is still here. We removed it up here from our pages. So let's see, we just run that and then have a look. All right, there we are. Let me open the console here, the developer tools, and we go, for instance, to network, like that. You want to see everything. So now we go to weather, and have you seen that already? So we do not really have to look here at the network tab. You can also just look at the screen. I do that one more time. I go to home. I restart the or reload the complete website. Then I go to weather again. I see some data, and then again we see the loading screen. We can also just refresh the page here. I see something, and after a little while we see the loading text and the data is different. Now what the heck is going on here? Again, let's have a look now at the network tab. So maybe let's just reload this again. So there we are. We see the weather page, and let me open the response here, or the preview. So here you see our temperature Celsius, for instance, is 17. Now when we have a look here, it's actually 18 Fahrenheit, 64, 62. Here it is 1, and here 36. And now if we scroll further down, we do not see actually anything else, just the very first call here, which is not really a call, it's just accessing our page, right? But again, what I want to emphasize here is you see that the data is different. Again, let me just close this, reload the application or the web app, and you see first data that is different than the data that we get after waiting 1 or 2 seconds, right? Now, when we again have a look at the code, we see a table, we see the loading text here. Now, this loading text is actually not seen the very first time. We already see a table, and what this application does is we have a delay of half a second, and then we get random data back. Now, you know by now that we got random data at first. We see the data on the screen, actually. It is already there. No loading text, so the page has finished loading actually, right? But then again, we see a loading text and then different data. And again, this is the magic, let's say, of pre-rendering. And this means that the actual page, the whole component, everything that is going on here, it already happens on the server, and the server then sends this static site to your client, and this is why you already see the complete results, okay? And this is default by now. But what we have here is we're telling our application that we actually want to use the WebAssembly render mode. So what this thing does then is that it renders a second time on the client. So waiting for these simulated 500 milliseconds in this time, or during this time, we see the loading text, and then we see the final new randomized weather forecast data. It is even more interesting and more crucial to know that when you really want to make a web service call. So let's just say we have our client here. We don't have this this stuff down here in the actual component. We want to make a call to a controller. So let me implement that real quick. For instance, we just add a new folder, and of course you can skip that if you already know what I'm doing. But if not, maybe just to explain you what is going on here, you see that we already have .NET Core and ASP.NET Core app here regarding the frameworks in our server project of this Blazor web app. So in essence, we have everything we need for a web API. So we can just add a controller here, an API controller, and we call this now, for instance, the weather controller. And here I just add a method like public async task action results. And what's the type again? It is, actually they have it here in the component, right? So let me just copy that like that, back to the controller. And there it is. So now here we have a list of weather forecasts. Let's just call this get and add some angle brackets here. So now this should work. And again, just grab the stuff here. No delay, or maybe a delay this time, why not? Put this here, and we have var forecasts, and we return OK, and then our forecasts like that. All right, let's make this public as well. And here now we add our attribute, not really necessary, but I think it's a good practice to add it here. Okay, so this is now our weather controller. Does in essence the exact same thing as the component here. Where was it? There it was. All right, so now what I want to do is I actually want to inject the HTTP client and make this call. Well, problem is we do not have the HTTP client here yet, registered yet. So let's register the HTTP client first. For that, we write builder services and then add scoped, and here SP for service provider, new HTTP client, and this thing needs a base address. So here the base address is then the new URI, and in our case builder host environment base address. Correct. So now our HTTP client is registered. We can go to our weather component. We inject the HTTP client. So add inject HTTP client HTTP, for instance. And here now we say await HTTP get from JSON async, and yeah, again the type is weather, a list of weather forecast. You see now regarding the clients, we could actually, for instance, add a shared project where we have the type, then reference this shared project there. Our URI now is API weather, like that, and let's just say our forecasts casts is now the result of that call, and we change the type here as well. So now this should actually work, hopefully, right? So we have our type, we have our call, we have the controller, and so on, and everything is rendered only on the client, right? Because of our WebAssembly render mode. So now it's restarting, and all of a sudden it already happens. Invalid operation exception, and I have to mute my phone. Cannot provide a value for property HTTP on Blazor pre-rendering pages, whether there's no registered service of type system.net.http.http client. And you are wondering, what the hell? I am going back to my project. I have a look here. There's this beautiful HTTP client. So what's going on there? Well, let's try something. And instead of the render mode interactive WebAssembly, we now create a new instance of the interactive WebAssembly render mode. And as you can see here, we can set a flag. And this is probably now written correctly. Now, what is this flag all about? You see it here. The flag is a bool, and it's called pre-render. So in essence, you want to decide, do we want to create a new instance of the WebAssembly render mode with pre-rendering active or not? And by default, this is set to true, but now it's set to false. We restart our application and real quick open it. And you see that it is loading. This looks like another issue here. Let's just open the console here, and it says 404 not found. So let's have a look again. Localhost API, whether it is. Yes, of course it is. I forgot something. That's the beauty of the new web app template. We have to register our controllers, of course. Because by default, we don't have controllers in our Blazor web app. I'm still used to the ASP.NET Core hosted templates or the whole architecture with Blazor WebAssembly in .NET 7. So not Razor components. We want to add controllers here like that with a semicolon, of course. And down here, we have to map them. So it's app map controllers. Why didn't you tell me? I know you've seen that and you just wanted to see me fail in this tutorial, but now it works. Isn't that nice? So here we see that we are actually making this call. Now the solution for that, if you want to use pre-rendering, would be to actually register the HTTP client on the server as well. So let's just try that and see the result. So back to the program CS here, then we go back and we just try it. All right, so we paste this here, and you already see here's no host environment. So we have to change that and give this thing an actual URI. So what maybe makes sense is to set an URI in the app settings JSON file. So here, let's just say our base URI, and from that we want to get a value like that. It is actually not there yet, and it could be null. So let's just add the exclamation mark here. So now when we have a look again in our application, there it is, localhost 7164 it is. So let's go to the app settings JSON, and up here we add base URI like that, add it here, and I'm too lazy. So let me just paste this here, remove the weather, of course, right? And restart this thing again. Still works. And now pre-rendering on, please. So back to our weather components. We just add it like that now. Restart the application. And you see again, this is interesting, right? It now works. We see data. And then we see the loading screen, and then we see other data. And let's have a look at the console here. We see when we just hit all, we now see our weather page here. Unfortunately, we don't see data here. So let's go to weather. Now working. Yep. We see data here. -1 Celsius 31. But you already see it here in the browser that it actually, maybe like that. Then here is the actual call, and here then we see the same data that we see on the screen or on the page. So Celsius 25, for instance, and Fahrenheit 76, and so on. So now you really see the difference, right? First, it was rendered on the server, so the server did all the action, and actually the server called the controller, which already is on the server. So it's kind of strange, actually, when you think under the hood. Okay, the server is making a web service call to itself, does some logic there, and then the client does the web service call again. So this is, I hope this was not too confusing, but this is, in my opinion, really a trap here in the new Blazor and .NET 8, and I think we haven't talked about that enough yet, but maybe now we did. So really, you have to pay attention whenever you see something strange. And I got this a lot, actually, in the .NET Web Academy, that students are asking, hey, I registered this service on the client and it is not working. Why is that? It is about authentication. It is about rendering stuff. It is so much stuff. And in the end, the solution so often is pre-rendering. Just disable pre-rendering and then it works. The big question now is, initially, I was talking about that. Why did Microsoft do it like that? Why did they set pre-rendering to true by default? Well, I don't work at Microsoft. I can't tell you for sure, but I assume it's about SEO, search engine optimization. Because the thing is, again, when we have a look at the console here and then have a look at the weather page, you see actually that this is what we get when we access the page. And this is also what all the crawlers see, what Google sees in the end when it would access your page. Now, when we disable that again, we set this to false and restart the application. There it is. And then go to the weather page. Let me just do that one more time, so we're really sure what's going on there. Yeah, this is great. This works. This is now the result. And for search engine optimization, that's not really good, right? Because we do not really see your data there, the content of your page. So for instance, if you're thinking of a blog, a portfolio page, whatever it is, where you don't really need, and this discussion can go on, where you don't really need this this architecture where you're making a web service call and the client has to wait for the result and then only render the result when the call is done. In this case, maybe you should really use pre-rendering or just use static server-side rendering. Again, this is a whole different topic here, whole nother completely different discussion. But as you can see, regarding SEO and Blazor WebAssembly, this doesn't really work. And this was also a problem with Blazor and .NET 7 and 6 and 5 and so on. So there you had to activate pre-rendering or make use of pre-rendering, and this was a bit different than now with .NET 8. So in the end, I think the direction is definitely a good direction. When you get used to it, it is a better way to implement your applications for the web, and you're building web applications there. So in my opinion, really, it does make sense. And again, whole different discussion there, but for many, many, many things, you can now stick to static server-side rendering with Blazor. But let's talk about that maybe in another video or maybe in the comments if you want. Okay, so I'm stopping now with that. I think I showed you the trap now. Pay attention there. Don't fall into it. Think of pre-rendering if you get these error messages that something is not registered, although you think it is registered. If you see a flashy effect on your page that something seems to be loading twice, then it might be the case that pre-rendering is the reason why this happens. Okay, again, I hope this wasn't too confusing. I hope you learned something, guys. Thank you very much for hitting the like button and subscribing to my channel. It does help to make these videos. Thank you so much. Thank you so much to all my supporters on Patreon. And thank you very much for watching this video. I hope I see you next time. Take care.